So I'm working on putting back together my budget build Odyssey 250, and I figured I'd share some tricks on how I'm saving a little bit of money. This started out pretty much just as a frame with a couple of front end components on it. I had some mostly surface rust, couple pitting in some area, but overall solid frame, no cracks. So I just decided to clean it up with a wire brush, some sandpaper, and prepped it with some rust converter and then primed and painted. I just masked off the original decals because I thought they were in pretty decent shape, and doesn't look perfect, but I'm not going for perfect, otherwise I'd be spending a lot more money. This is a budget build. But I wanted to share a couple of spots where I ran into some problems, like finding these studs. Turned out to be kind of difficult and or expensive. So I ended up buying these exhaust manifold studs. They should be plenty strong, but they are Dorman brand. I believe 03109 is the part number. There's that. I also decided, instead of replacing the seal, open bearing, and seal on the other side, I just got a sealed bearing from McMaster Car. And I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. Obviously dirt can still get in there, but it's a sealed bearing, so hopefully it'll live a little bit longer, and heck of a lot cheaper than buying a kit with all the seals and everything in it. Obviously for the rims, I'm just spray painting them and putting them back together. Not trying to make them look perfect, just cutting down on some of the corrosion.
The rims were pretty badly rusted, and I didn't want to spend hours and hours sandblasting them. So I ended up soaking them in some industrial strength vinegar overnight, and it did a pretty good job of removing most of the rust and all of the paint. Just pretty much just rinsed right off. So well worth it.
Or in adding some corrosion prevention with some paint. I did buy some O-rings, but once again, the genuine Honda parts are pretty expensive, so I bought some from McMaster Car. Hopefully those will work out. Some of the other O-rings that I've bought, rather than the factory Honda parts, these are the O-rings that go on the inside of the J-arms. And basically, a lot of how I save some money is grab a pair of calipers, measure the parts, and if you can find them on McMaster or elsewhere, they're usually cheaper than genuine Honda parts. I'll leave it up to you to determine whether or not that's good or bad. These covers were in rough shape. They were cracked and everything. So I ended up using some, you can kind of use whatever you want, but I like this weather strip adhesive. Remains fairly flexible and keeps it watertight. So I've got those things. These took forever to take off. Share a quick video on how I did that. Is basically just apply a lot of heat, whack it with a hammer until it moves, spray some lube in there, and keep twisting it back and forth, slowly working its way off. First one took me about 4 hours. Second one I got in about an hour. But then pack the heck out of them with grease. You could even put a Zerk fitting on here if you really wanted to keep them lubed up. Everything else, I do have access to a sandblaster, so I sandblasted everything that was easily come off, including the springs. You can even see this one's still bent. So I might replace those later, but trying to keep things on the cheap. These washers and one of the missing axle nuts I also bought on McMaster. McMaster's also not the cheapest, but it's certainly cheaper than Honda, in a lot of cases anyway. And you can also look elsewhere. Once you have the sizes, you can try to find, actually I think I bought these smaller O-rings on Amazon. There are a number of suppliers out there. I've also got several sets of these steering wheel covers, and all of them are cracked in all the same spots. So I just used a hot stapler to put a staple wherever there are cracks. I think there's a good one here. Yeah, there you can see that. The staple gun kits, or the heat staplers, are available on Amazon for like 40 bucks. They're fairly cheap these days, but there are plenty of other ways to do it. You can just heat up a literal staple with a blowtorch and hold it with some tweezers or pliers and stick them in. Let it melt, cool down, wait for it to cool all the way before you release, otherwise won't set in there properly. But obviously not perfect, and you know, it'll work though. Let's see, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, I have about 6 of these e-brake handles, and every single one of them, there's a spring inside here that returns this. If you don't have that, then that little catch won't catch on the teeth and things just fall apart. So I ended up finding, I took it apart, took some measurements off of the spring. One of the things I do like about McMaster is they have, you can search by, if you're looking at a spring, the diameter, the length, the thickness, what type of spring, compression, return, whatever else available there are. But anyway, made it pretty easy to find something really close, and it works really well, so I'm pretty happy with that. So I think that's pretty much everything so far. Hoping, obviously, you know, these aren't normally black, but again, I'm just going for some rust prevention and trying to not spend a ton of money. I am not planning to fully restore this. It works pretty well, although it's gonna be hard to turn right now with the e-brake on. Here's some of my other ones. I got that one. That one's mostly a parts vehicle, but it's got a Harbor or a Briggs & Stratton engine in it. There is the case for what will be going in my budget vehicle. And I think I'm going to put an Elsinore head on it. That's what came off of it. But it's in fairly rough shape, so we'll see how that goes. Trying to get one set of clutches working. This is one of the other rims that had a pretty nasty blowout on it, so I'm welding it up, maybe keep it as a spare just in case. My welds aren't great, if you couldn't tell. I won't zoom in. So definitely a work in progress. I've got the cable, the brake cable out. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to save that. It's rusted solid, but hopefully it's good enough. Otherwise they're not too expensive. Same thing with the crank. This had a fair bit of corrosion, but this seems pretty good. There's no up and down play. There's a little bit of side to side, but I think that's normal. Or left to right. It doesn't actually move too much, but we'll see.